Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation. This is my first time to Iceland, and I'm already in love with this place. So let's begin. Okay. Yeah, so I work at Salk Institute. This is the awesome institute that also got some award for architecture, and I'll touch slightly on that aspect. So to give you a context of what I'm going to talk about, if you think of the year 1900, the stats about health were almost similar between Iceland and the US. At the time of birth, the life expectancy was somewhere between 45 to 47 years. Only 1 in 100 could live up to the age of 90, so that was almost by luck that people are living, because 1/3 of all babies died before the age of 5, and leading cause of death and disease was infectious disease, infection. So that's why the microbial cause of disease, that theory kind of drove biomedical research for a long period of time. And it was mostly sanitation, vaccination, and antibiotics that saved the young. And as a result, for every year of biomedical research for the last 100 years, we have been adding 3 months to human longevity. So now, in 2010, in the US, life expectancy is around 79 years, and in Iceland, it's a little above 80 years. 1 in 4 babies will live up to the age of 90, but the challenge is this: 1/3 of all adults, when I say adults above the age of 21, they suffer from at least one non-infectious chronic disease. And in the US, at the age of 65, when people retire, there are at least 2 chronic diseases. And they have to live with those chronic diseases for at least 15 to 20 years based on the life expectancy. And the cure is, there is no cure is rare, and the current treatments essentially help people to live with disease and disability. And just like microbial cause of disease drove most of the death 100 years ago, now we know lifestyle contributes to disease risk. But the problem is, what is lifestyle? Lifestyle is a very fuzzy word that we use to justify anything and everything that we want to promote. So there are a lot of stuff on this slide, and there are a lot more that you can also imagine put on the slide. But the way we wanted to define lifestyle, to summarize all of these into one single slide, was to say lifestyle is what, when, and how much we eat, sleep, move, and connect. That relates to your stress and relaxation on a daily basis. That's more important, that you have to do it on a daily basis. This is part of your life. It's almost like brushing your teeth. So you may be surprised by the word when, because there is not much about timing in the previous slide. So why did this when word come? So to again give you some context, our Earth has been rotating for billions of years, and all life forms on our planet evolved on this rotating Earth. And with the rotation of the planet, there is predictable change in light and dark, predictable change in temperature, food availability, etc. So as a result, almost every living organism, from pond scum to elephant, have developed what we call circadian clock or circadian timing system. And the reason why we have time is everything cannot happen at once. You cannot sleep and eat at the same time. We cannot damage our DNA and repair at the same time. We cannot divide our cells and kill them at the same time. So almost every aspect of biology, starting from single cell, single mitochondria function to the whole animal, is strongly circadian. We need to have that timing component. And if we look at humans, then if you're lucky enough and you went to bed around 9 to 10 o'clock last night, then your deepest sleep happened around 2 o'clock. And as your body prepared to wake up, even without whether you are using alarm clock or not, the body has its own alarm clock. It prepares your body to wake up. By pumping blood slightly more, your heart rate begins to rise, your body temperature begins to rise even before you open your eyes. And as soon as we open our eyes, the melatonin level, that's the sleep hormone, that drops. The stress hormone begins to rise. Bowel movement is most likely in the morning. And then towards the middle of the day, you have best mental capacity to decide you have better alertness, and that's why I asked the organizer to have my talk right at this time. And then, as the day progresses, you have best muscle performance. It peaks around 5 o'clock in the evening. In fact, if you're into sports betting, you got to watch when the West Coast team flies to East Coast and plays the Monday Night Football, because people have done the stats. They have advantage over the home team on the first day after jet travel over 3 time zones. And then, as your body prepares to sleep, your melatonin level begins to rise, your body temperature cools down, and you go to sleep. And this happens on a daily basis. And if you think about it, the definition of having a good health is to have these rhythms. You cannot imagine a good day without having good alertness throughout your day, without having better muscle performance, or not feeling sleepy at night time. So to have a good clock is to be healthy. But then if we summarize all of these into bite size, then what you'll realize is circadian clock essentially regulates 3 fundamental pillars of health. That is sleep and nutrient metabolism and physical activity. And it's not that simple, because there are almost half of our genome in any given cell is turns on and turns off in a predictable fashion. And then there is a lot of interaction among them. So again, if we simplify, then what I told you is the clock regulates at least 3 different major aspects of health. At the same time, each of these aspects also has its own autoregulation. For example, if you didn't sleep last night, then you must be feeling sleepy, and that has nothing to do with clock, because sleep itself has its own homeostat. And similarly, if you didn't eat for 24 hours, you'll feel hungry no matter what time of the day, because there is a nutrient homeostat. And similarly, we think there must be a physical activity homeostat, particularly people who exercise every day. If you don't exercise for a day or 2, you feel cranky, your muscles are aching to do that exercise. And we know that these 3, again, are interconnected, because sleep affects nutrient metabolism. You already heard about that. Metabolism affects physical activity, we know that, and physical activity affects sleep. And on top of this, the clock is not just sitting inside our body, it interacts with light and darkness. And also in many organisms, even in us, although we don't realize it, there is also an interaction with temperature. Our core body temperature cycles on a daily basis, and the temperature also regulates the clock in a weird fashion. So this looks very complicated, but the good thing is, as you can see, these are all interconnected. If you change sleep, you can change a lot of these things. If you change activity, you can also improve health, etc. These are all interconnected. But the problem is, we are not getting enough sleep, and it's very hard for a lot of people to increase their sleep by an hour or 2. And as infrastructure improves, the key definition of infrastructure is to make things, people, products, and waste to move from one place to another place with less energy. So that means we can move from one place to another without spending too much physical activity. So as infrastructure improves, we also reduce our physical activity. And that's why we have to have a voluntary decision to do physical activity. So these 2 aspects are almost out of reach or out of regulation for most people. And similarly, there are many aspects of nutrient metabolism. Access to nutrition, quality of nutrition is also a challenge. So that's why we wanted to dig deep and then see how we can understand the regulation by light and darkness, or timing, how we can change timing to improve health. So almost 15 years ago, we started working on molecular basis of circadian rhythm. And this field is very new. The field is only 20, 25 years old. So many of these aspects, many of the principles are not even in textbook for medical scientists. So at the base of our brain, so what you're looking at is base of our brain. This is a mouse brain, but the human brain is also the same. We have nearly 20,000 master clock neurons called suprachiasmatic nucleus. So these are the 20,000 neurons, 10,000 here and 10,000 there. And those are actually hardwired. They're connected straight to light sensors in the retina. And then the green ones here you see, green fibers, these are essentially wires coming from the retina, coming from our eye, and connecting this master clock to the outside world through the light sensors. And 15 years ago, we actually discovered a new light sensor, what we call melanopsin, or blue light sensing neurons. There are only 5,000 of them in our human retina. And they don't help us to find images, but they just sense this blue light. And these blue light sensing neurons then again send that information to this master clock that's in the base of the hypothalamus. And this master clock produces different kind of neuropeptides or hormones, and that in turn regulates clocks in almost every organ. So just like our brain has a clock that tells our brain to go to sleep and wake up, almost every organ, every cell in our body has a clock. And that means every organ has an optimum time to function and also needs some rest time to wind down, repair, rejuvenate, and reset. So as a result, we have these daily rhythms in physical activity, metabolism, behavior, etc. And as I told you, these are actually the real light-sensing neurons in a retina. You can see these are nicely spaced, and they make kind of a light-capturing net-like structure. And these melanopsin neurons actually regulate sleep and activity. So during very bright daylight, the outdoor light actually is very strong, very rich source of blue light. That activates this light sensor, synchronizes brain clock and raises alertness, reduces depression. And it needs, during daytime, you need almost 1,000 or 2,000 lux of light to activate it. So if you go outside now, even if it is cloudy day, you'll get nearly 5,000 to 10,000 lux of light. So even in cloudy day in Iceland, you can get enough light to activate this light receptor. But in nighttime, it's a different story. Since this light receptor is sensitive to blue light, and most of our ancestral light was light from fire, wood burning fire, that fire light is very weak in blue light. And that's why that could not activate this light sensor. As a result, it's almost inactive in candlelight or firelight, and that helps the sleep hormone melatonin to rise in the evening and then make us fall asleep. But what has changed? Now as we move into indoor spaces, and actually modern humans, we spend 87 to 93% of our time indoor. And during daytime, we spend less than 5% of our time outdoor. So during daytime, we have very dim light indoor. That reduces activation of this blue light sensor. It reduces alertness, reduces performance, can promote ADHD among children, depression, bipolar syndrome, PTSD, and also depression in very older adults who are almost immobile and cannot move outside. Conversely, at nighttime, we have a lot of light because we are actually tuned to looking at that firelight or moonlight, which is less than a lux of light. And now that we have more light, it disrupts circadian rhythm. It makes our brain think it's daytime, and then reduces sleep hormone melatonin, keeps us awake, and also contributes to all of these diseases. So as a result, what we can say is light for vision is not same as light for health. So how do we get there? So a few years ago, Rosie Blau from The Economist actually interviewed me and then wrote a 7-page article. And then, through a reporter's eye, it actually made me realize the importance of our discovery. And we realized that light is a therapeutic agent. Just imagine, if carbon monoxide affects our health and CO or carbon monoxide or CO2 is regulated, who regulates light? And who regulates darkness? Do we have a fundamental right to darkness? Do we have a fundamental right to having bright light during daytime? And how do we implement it? So one fundamental question you might ask is how much light is good for us? And we actually don't have a good answer because, again, depending on what stage of life you are, how opaque is your lenses, because as we age, our lens transmits less and less blue light. So older people who haven't gone through a cataract surgery, their lenses are very opaque to blue light. So we cannot say, but at least we can come up with a rule of thumb that for depression, at least somewhere between 15 minutes to 1 hour of 10,000 lux of light is good enough. And that has been shown in a clinical setting. An average person should get at least 2,000 lux of light, somewhere between 15 minutes to an hour, but I would say more than an hour is good enough. And then at night time, at least we should reduce our light to less than 20 lux, an hour or two before going to bed. As a reference, for example, in this room right now, I took a light reading, it's around 20 lux. So you can imagine this is the type of light you want before going to bed. And in fact, there are many commercial light meter app you can download to play with it. At the same time, we also have a light app called MyLux, which is available from iOS free of charge. And so what is my group doing to improve lighting in everyday life? So we have been working with to develop an exposure guideline. So we're working with NIH, Environmental Health and Safety Institute, to come up with an exposure guideline for shift workers for various work setting. With ASRE, Delos, and Leeds, we're also coming up with building codes to come up with circadian lighting standards, so that in future, maybe your LEED certification will get another 5 points for having circadian lighting, where your lighting will change depending on day or night. We're also working with architects through Academy of Neuroscience for Architects on architectural design. What is good news is glass has become a structural element in building. It can bear a lot of loads. And actually, you have very nice examples all throughout the city of glass being used very innovatively to bring daylight into very interior of building. So those are the kind of stuff we are doing. And then there are many circadian lighting companies that are now coming up with circadian lighting. And you may or may not know that International Space Station actually got circadian lighting a year ago because ISS astronauts go through depression and bipolar syndrome very frequently. So we'll see whether that improves. At the same time, there are also other products coming up into the market, and it's really gratifying to see that our discovery, basic science discovery that happened in mice 15 years ago, has already been translated to at least a couple of billion phones, because now in your phone, that night shift feature that you have is based on this fundamental discovery that blue light raises alertness and orange light promotes sleep. So with that, I'll shift gear. If we actually look at the satellite map of the US, it looks like this at nighttime, and if you zoom in, then the cities look like this, and if you zoom into a house, it should be looking during daytime like this, but nighttime, we have changed our kitchen, changed our living room. We have access to artificial light, we have a lot of entertainment, and then we have access to all this food. So then we switched, we asked, is light the only cue to reset the clock, or are there other cues? And to make a long story short, what we figured out is if food is given at the wrong time, then it can override the effect of light, and now food becomes the measure and training cue or resetting cue to the rest of the body. So that means in the middle of the night, a late night, if you're eating a snack, that's telling the body, now the body is confused and is thinking that whether it's middle of the night or middle of the morning. So it has to try to reset or try to drop one thing the body is supposed to do at night, for example, repair, reset, and rejuvenation. It drops that and restarts the day. And to ask this, to kind of explain this in a more simple fashion, actually, a previous speaker kind of nicely showed this as metabolic flexibility. So what happens is if you have 3 meals a day, as soon as you start your breakfast, your body goes to burning sugar. So your body is in burning sugar mode almost throughout the day. And after the last meal, as the fasting progresses, then the sugar burning goes down. And during daytime, if fat burning is very low, and only after a few hours of fasting, fat burning goes up. So it happens on a daily basis. So this up and down happens on a daily basis. So now imagine spreading these 3 meals to a longer interval. So if we do that, then the burning sugar part will actually continue for a longer time, and there is insufficient fast, so the body never switches completely to fat burning mode. So this is a condition where the same 3 meals are actually eaten in 15 hours instead of 10 hours. Now if we compare this, then if a person actually eats for 10 hours, then there is a period of time, maybe 2 to 3 hours at night time, that's when the fat is burnt much better. Whereas the same meal, if they are spread over 15 hours, it may not burn that fat. That was the hypothesis, but how do we test it? So we went back to mice because we can do mouse research pretty well, and we can make mice healthy or weak. And we did a very simple experiment where we had two identical set of mice. They had the same genotype, same genes. They came from the same same parents, so same litter. And also they came from the same room, so that means they had the same microbiome. So one group of mice had access to food 24/7, and this food was very rich in fat. So they had 60% calories coming from fat, but at the same time, 20% calories were coming from processed carb, fructose. And we weighed the mice in the beginning. There were 25 grams to begin with. The second group of mice got the same number of calories from the same source, but had to eat all this food within 8 hours interval every night. And for the next 17, 18 weeks, every week we weighed the food, we weighed the mice to make sure that they're eating the same number of calories. So at the end of 18 weeks, we're surprised because our hypothesis is if nutrition quality and quantity matters, then these two groups of mice should look completely identical. But surprisingly, those mice that eat randomly, they became obese. These mice that ate the same number of calories weighed 28% less. And most of the reduction in body weight came from reduction in body fat. And if we open up their liver, then those mice had fatty liver disease. This is a disease that will strike 1 in 3 in the US, and in the Western world, it strikes 1 in 4. And those mice were completely protected from this fatty liver disease. And not only that, they also had better blood sugar control, better cholesterol level. They had better energy expenditure. What happens is when they eat for 8 hours, then the mitochondria is more active. Mitochondria dissipates all the extra fat into pure heat. So those mice actually spend or produce a lot of heat. They have better motor control, and they also have better endurance. And this was surprising because we thought that the mice that are fasting for 16 hours, how can they run on treadmill? So when we put these two groups of mice together, the mice that are eating only for 8 hours, that not only they outran the mice that had 24-hour access to fatty food, they outran the mice that had 24-hour access to healthy food as well. So that was really surprising, so we had to do the experiment again and again. So that paper came out in 2012, and that's summarized in this very nice cartoon that the mice that ate 24/7 becomes obese, and this mouse that eats the same number of calories in a slightly different restaurant is lean. So with that, we coined the term called time-restricted feeding, where the timing of food is restricted, no calorie restriction or nutrition quality. But at the same time, it raised many different questions. Is 8 hours a magic number? In fact, we didn't do the 8-hour diet because of some previous empirical evidence. That was just convenient. But unfortunately, there is even a book called 8-Hour Diet. So we had to go back and ask whether 8 hours is a magic number. And also, if we take obese mice, diabetic mice, can we reverse the disease? And does it have a legacy effect? If the mice did 8-hour diet for half of their life, are they completely protected, even if they go back to 24-hour eating? So to do this, one of my amazing postdocs went back to the mouse room, brought 500 or 600 mice, and then put them on different diets. And the idea was they will always get the same number of daily calories and identical diet. They could have the food in 8 hours, 9 hours, 10, 11, 12, or weekends off, or even 15 hours. And then she changed the diet to high-carb diet, high fructose diet, high sucrose diet, high-fat diet, all kinds of healthy, unhealthy. Even we have now a high cholesterol diet. And then we do this experiment somewhere between 13 weeks to 26, and now up to a year. And we always find the same outcome. So the mice that eat, that have limited hours, whether it's 9, 10, 11, or 12, not at 15 hours, they're always protected from obesity. They have much better blood sugar, blood cholesterol, body fat, liver disease, gut disease. For example, these mice actually have much better diversity in their gut microbiome. That's what Rangan told. That's good for us. They always have better endurance. They always have better immune function, and surprisingly, they also sleep better. We did not have a specific intervention, or we didn't even think that these mice will sleep better, but surprisingly they get into much deeper sleep, and small disturbances don't wake them up. And this is what we lack as we grow old, that small things wake us up. That's why we wake up. And think about the little kids. They can sleep through the entire night with all these disturbances in the room. So that's why the saying goes, sleeping like a baby. And these mice slept like babies. So to put this discovery in the context of nutrition research, for the last 100 years, we have been focused on calories, because if you reduce calories by 70%, this was done in 1930, the experiment, on identical set of mice, then mice that eat less calories, they live longer. That led to the idea of counting calories. And this also improves a lot of different physiological outcomes. The second experiment goes back to 1970s through 1990s, where you can take identical set of mouse, one mouse gets normal diet, and the other mouse you change different macronutrient or micronutrient. In this case, high-fat diet will make this mouse obese, even if the genotype is same. And there are variations of the same theme where mice are given high-protein diet, high ketogenic diet, etc. But this is the same experiment. You change the measure nutrition quality, and you change outcome. In that context, I think our experiment adds a completely new dimension, where you keep the same number of calories from the same nutrient source, but if you change timing, then you can change outcome. Not only that, what is really surprising is now people are going back to these caloric restriction studies, and they're finding that from mice to monkeys, even to human, most of the caloric restriction studies involve a timing component, because mice eat all their reduced calories within 3 to 4 hours, and humans in caloric restriction studies eat all their food within 10 to 12 hours. So now the question has actually been flipped. Are the benefits of caloric restriction from mice to monkeys to humans are entirely due to calorie restriction or time restriction? So in fact, last week, 2 days ago, I was in NIH, where we discussed new set of experiment to test exactly this question. Because people more and more, because you can do the experiment on yourself, and you can find whether timing does matter. And people are finding that timing has a huge impact. So to go from mouse to human, I'm actually in a research institute. We don't have access to hospital. But we thought we can reach to people through apps. So we developed a new app called My Circadian Clock, which is now available in both iOS and Android. But one has to go to this website to sign up and go through informed consent. And we asked people to take a picture of every food that they eat. And this was very simple, because in any other nutrition app, you got to enter every single item you eat, the portion size, etc. And it takes somewhere between 40 seconds to 5 minutes to log your food. But if you think of Amazon one-click checkout, the reason why Amazon became so popular, partly because of one-click checkout. You just click once, you are checked out. So we thought if we can make it simple, so that one click, open the app, second click, take the picture, third click, save. And actually, the photo in the original app, it did not save the picture in the phone, it saved it on our server. So people could not go back and review their picture and change their nutrition quality or quantity. And people took all kinds of pictures, and they get hooked. Because if you think about it, 1/3 of Facebook images are food pictures. 1/3 of Instagram pictures are food pictures. We love to show what we eat. We love to see what other people eat. And so once we have these pictures and timing, then how do we analyze the data? Because nowhere else people had actually analyzed the eating pattern data. So we came up with a new idea that just like actogram, this is a term used in activity monitoring, we can call it feedogram when people eat. So every time a food picture comes in, we put it on a timeline, and then if somebody is taking too many pictures within 15 minutes, we know an average meal takes 15 minutes to eat, then we lump that all into one hash mark. One doesn't get too many points for that. And then we've invited 150 people to do a control study where they have to actually take everything that we eat. They have to take a picture. That's it for 3 weeks, and we can look at the eating pattern. So this is eating pattern of one individual. Each hash mark is a calorie-containing food item or beverage item. So from here, it's very difficult to analyze any pattern. So a simple thing that you can do is you can collate all of this, and you can clearly see what is the eating pattern during weekday and weekend. So this person definitely was waking up quite late in the weekend. So even if you just collate all of these and then put it on a circular map, you can see how over 3 weeks, this person quite a few times actually woke up in the middle of the night or was working late and was eating late. And this is the pattern from 156 people in our study. All these people were healthy. None of them had a known disease, and they all claimed that they eat all their food within 12 to 13 hours in a day in response to a question. But when they actually recorded, this is what we found. And in fact, if we look at the number of events, as expected, they peak around noontime. That's when people eat their lunch, and again at dinner time here. And if we ask the average number of calories per event or pictures, again, that peaks around noontime and in the evening. You might say that, well, these might be just low-calorie little snacks. But actually, the number of calories packed in those snacks is much higher than what they eat during lunch and dinner. So that was really surprising. But anyways, how to simplify this data? We actually came up with an idea that the time interval in which you can fit 90% of all your food within a 2-week interval is your likely eating duration. That's when you are likely to eat. So these are eating interval of 156 people, and the bottom line is 50% of adults eat for 15 hours or longer. And why this is important is, in mice, if we do the same experiment, and if they eat for 15 hours, if they're eating healthy diet, they may be fine. But as soon as they cross the boundary, they eat something unhealthy, then they pick up diseases. So that's why we think there's a huge potential. A lot of people can actually go back and just check their eating time and then slightly modify and might benefit. At the same time, we also gave them an activity monitor that measured their sleep activity and also light exposure. So the red mark here is food, yellow is light, and this is activity, and it's monitored over three weeks. From here, we can actually figure out when did they wake up in the weekend and how that waking up behavior changed their eating behavior. So the breakfast time in nearly 25% of people changes by 2 hours. It's almost like flying over 2 time zones in the weekend and then coming back. And just like your brain clock gets confused, your stomach clock, your liver clock, all these other clocks also get that what we call metabolic jet lag, so they get confused over the weekend. But the dinner time actually doesn't change because we kind of randomly eat dinner both in the weekday and weekend. And since we have everybody's caloric intake data, we can also ask a very simple question. When do people eat what fraction of food? The popular saying is we should eat bigger breakfast in the morning because that's when our insulin response is much better. But surprisingly, all of our subjects, they eat less than 15% of their daily total intake before noon. And we are actually counting from 4 a.m. onwards as the day begins. So in the first 8 hours of the day, people eat less than 1/4 of their daily caloric intake. And by evening, they still have 1/3 food to go. And in fact, in the first 3 hours of evening, people eat more food than in the first 8 hours of the day. So that means we have a lot of room for improvement if we just switch calories from one place to another without even switching quantity and quality of nutrition. There might be some benefit. So now with this data, then the question is, what else we can analyze? Since we had the activity record and sleep pattern, we can ask another question. How quickly after waking up people go for that first coffee or first crackers or anything that you can think of people eat? So we can measure that from wake-up time to the first image. And then what we found is nearly 80% of people eat or drink something that contains at least 50 kilocalories or more within an hour of waking up. And we can do the same thing for sleep time. And what is interesting is, again, what we find is 50% of people eat or drink something that has 50 kilocalories or more within 2 hours before going to bed. So the bottom line is, as long as our eyes are open, our mouth is open. So it has a huge impact or implication for interpreting some of the historical data showing people who sleep less are more prone to metabolic disease. It's more likely that people who sleep less, they're eating more because they keep on eating until they drop into the bed. So you might ask, if we take now these people who are eating for 15 or 16 hours, if we shrink their eating time, can we shrink these people? So we took 8 or 10 people in this pilot feasibility study, and these were overweight or obese people, and we asked them to eat only for 10 hours without giving them any other advice whether they should change their nutrition quality or quantity. And we could shrink them by almost 4% body weight. And these were not obese people. These were overweight with BMI around 27, 28. But the fact that we could shrink them by 3 to 4% body weight within 16 weeks, and then we let them free. We brought them back after 1 year. They still maintained that low body weight. Then we asked, what inspired you to keep this habit? And what was surprising was they said they felt more energetic throughout the day, and second, they slept much better. And third, they reduced acid reflux and indigestion. If you think about it, in the US alone, 70 million prescriptions are written only for indigestion and acid reflux. That keeps people awake in the middle of the night. And if that goes away, then they sleep better. If they slept better and wake up light, then they can go for a run, they can do exercise. So we had no idea that by changing food timing, we can improve sleep, and we can improve their daytime alertness and activity so that they can go for a run. And that was, sometimes you do this simple experiment and you get this complex answer. You might ask, did they change their calorie? Yes, they did. What happens is, when they're given only 10 hours to eat, and they're self-selected, and they stop at 8 o'clock at night, they cannot drink that much alcohol because the kitchen closes at 8. So they reduce their alcohol. That improves nutrition quality. In the morning, they're feeling hungry. And if you think about it, breakfast is the only meal, perhaps the only meal in our daily life on which we have complete control. If you're careful about your nutrition, the first thing you improve is your breakfast. So these guys actually had bigger breakfast and also better breakfast. So you change one parameter, only timing, and you see a ripple effect or the positive effect on multiple different parameters. In fact, last year, Science magazine finally paid attention to all these time-restricted feeding studies going on, so they had a special issue. It was mostly on shift worker, but what is interesting is we are all shift workers because we all shift our wakeful and activity times slightly between weekday and weekend. And when we change timing of feeding, we have huge amount of effect, positive effects on multiple things, including cancer. Because there is another independent studies on thousands of women showing that women who have a 13 hours overnight fast are better protected from breast cancer than women who eat late into the night. Not only that, women who are going through breast cancer therapy, their prognosis is much better and much faster if they maintain their 13 hours fast. So what is next? We want to measure how erratic is our lifestyle all over the world and what changes people can adopt. Maybe the small number of people we had, they could adopt a timing change. Can people adopt other kind of changes if we show them the data? And then what happens when they make those changes? Because in a simple clinical trial that we did, we had only weight change, but it's possible that somebody else might have 3 or 4 different conditions, and 1 or 2 might improve, and 1 or 2 may not improve. And which changes are long-lasting? What changes people can pick up, like brushing your teeth, that they don't have to even think about it. So that's why, again, we are going back to this My Circadian Clock. We just improved the app recently. And the reason why we want to do it this way is a classic clinical trial will only look at few hundred people. We want to look at thousands of people all over the world. And only through this, we can reach to a lot of people. And unlike mice, people actually give us feedback. So they tell us what kind of things improved. In mice, we actually didn't figure out that the mice were sleeping better. People told us first that they were sleeping better, and then we went back to mice to check them. The same thing happened in gut dysbiosis. People told us first that the acid reflux was improving. Then we went back to mice. So there is a beauty of doing this way. You go back to people, and people always say, bench to bedside. But what you're doing is bench to bedside, back to bench. So in that way, we can do basic science and translational research. So for example, 16 months ago, when we started our study, then these were the users. And then slowly, very quickly, within 3 months, we covered a large part of US and then all over the world. And that was only 2016 June. So over the last 16, 17 months, we have covered a lot more space. And one last example I'll give you, and this is from India. From New Delhi area, we collected data from nearly 100 people. You're looking at their eating pattern, 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. All this individual color is one individual. And you see these 10 people here, they're eating almost randomly throughout day and night. But in response to our questionnaire, they had said that they are not shift worker. Then who are they? So we actually called them and went specifically and asked them, you said you are not shift worker, but what is this? And surprisingly, half of them are students, and then the other half are spouses of shift workers. So that means you may not be a card-carrying shift worker, but you might be disturbing your clock a lot. And with that, I'll stop with this summary slide that circadian disruption can predispose us to a lot of different diseases, but we can prevent, we can even reverse them by simple changes like changing your light bulb or watching your time when you had your breakfast and when you can stop eating. Thank you.